Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new TEAM therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
Hi, David, and welcome to our listeners around the world, in the United States, in Canada, Mexico, and throughout the galaxy in the Milky Way. This is the Feeling Good podcast, episode 371. And let's see if I can do another endorsement. We have a lot of them. Here's a quick one, because we're going to do a kind of an interesting, intricate. So I won't read a really long endorsement, but Carolyn wrote us about episode 364, which was an Ask David episode that specifically talked about self-esteem versus self-confidence versus self-acceptance. And Carolyn simply wrote you, "Thanks for another good one." Carolyn.
That is short. Thank you, Carolyn. Glad you liked it.
Yeah, thanks for another good one. I like that. It's so true. So today we're just going to do one Ask David question because it's going to take up the whole podcast. And it's on anger. So Jay wrote you, "Are you ever going to do a podcast on anger?" Dr. Burns, are you ever going to do a podcast on anger with Rhonda and Matt? You have done many podcasts on depression, anxiety, interpersonal relationships. Yet there's not one podcast addressing anger. Given the world we live in right now, maybe it's time to address anger from a TEAM-CBT perspective and give it the attention you have given anxiety and depression. All the best, Jay.
Well, I would say thank you, Jay. And that question just came in 2 or 3 days ago, and I'm glad that we're doing this podcast so quickly for you, Jay. And I think you're right. I think we've kind of not emphasized treating anger so much, and it's in the world, it's at least as important as depression, for sure. You've got the inner suffering of depression. That's where you're thinking, I'm no good. And that's what we're generally focusing on. And then you've got the outer directed shoulds, like you're no good, you're to blame, you shouldn't be the way you are. And that's causing not only anger but violence, as well as racial and religious hatred and war. And we're seeing so much of that building up in the world right now. And it seems like we're on the verge of war, not only overseas, but even in our own country, with the Republicans and the Democrats can't get along with each other, and some of them don't seem to feel that there's something religious and wonderful about being kick-ass and being angry and blaming and putting other people down. And so we'll see what we can do. We certainly give it an introductory focus, today on anger, and I just have a couple things and to general ideas to get us started. And one is that in the Feeling Good app, we measure 7 negative feelings, including depression or feeling down, feeling anxious or worried. That's the second one. And feeling guilty or ashamed is a third category. Feeling inadequate or inferior or worthless, that's a fourth category that we're measuring. feeling lonely is a fifth, hopeless is a sixth, and angry is a seventh. So we're measuring those seven. And one thing that really surprised me is that we're taught that there's all these different mental disorders that are all different and separate from each other. So that depression is very different from anxiety, and they're very different from anger and loneliness. But in the app, all these seven emotions go up and down together, which was very interesting. And I've always taught that anger is the toughest emotion, and I didn't think it would be helped much by our Feeling Good app. And it's actually been helped very dramatically with reductions of 50 to 60% in just 2 days, exactly the same reductions we see in feeling down and unhappy or anxious or lonely or worthless and so on and so forth. So that's something to keep in mind. It was a huge surprise. The second general thing that I wanted to say is that anger is addictive. Depression, there is resistance to giving up depression, but it's not addictive in the sense that anger is. And that's because in depression, you're thinking that I'm no good. And you have all these distorted thoughts about yourself, like with emotional reasoning and self-blame and all or nothing thinking and labeling yourself and the 10 key distortions I first described in my book, Feeling Good, more than 40 years ago.
Wow.
And then anger, on the other hand, you're directing these distortions at other people. You're saying you're to blame. You're no good. It's all your fault. You'll never change. You're directing the distortions outward at other people, and that creates feelings of moral superiority, and those feelings are addictive. And you see that in international conflict, with the Palestinians and the Israelis, or between the Democrats and the Republicans, or any group that's at war. You see each side feeling morally superior and seeing the other as some kind of scum enemy that's morally inferior, and then that gives you the justification to hurt and kill that person and to feel good about what you're doing. And so there's much less motivation to give up anger and hatred because it kind of makes you feel good. And you can see some of these conflicts have been going on for, I think, the hatred of Jews is way more than 2,000 years. It probably goes back, would you say, 5,000 years, Rhonda?
Probably.
To Abraham and Moses and because let my people go and all of that kind of thing, and seeing people were different as others, and so that makes the treatment of anger fairly challenging. Because most angry people aren't looking for help; they're looking for blood, for revenge.
Unless right. I'm thinking also of anger in interpersonal relationships, and that can be addicting because it can be really empowering in the same way that it's morally superior. Like, I'm better than you. I want to control you. I get to control you with my anger. And lots of times people in those roles in their relationship, they won't change unless they're forced to.
Yeah. And you saw a lot of that in your legal forensic psychological work with people who were court ordered to have treatments relative to sometimes their children, and conflicts over who's going to get to be with the children, and visitation rights and all of that, and so I'm sure you've seen more than more than your fill of this kind of behavior. Even to this day, I think you might have seen a little peek of it here and there.
Yeah, I have seen a peek of it.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't you say too that, I mean, anger is a natural emotion, and, we don't want to say never feel anger, since all emotions are part of life. Isn't the goal not really to eliminate anger altogether, but to learn how to express it constructively, or learn how to manage it in a way that's helpful or healthy for you and the people around you, people you're in relationship with?
Well, that can be an aim, but I don't like to, impose my goals on patients, because that's the cause of all therapeutic failure. But you're right that one of the shifts in effective treatment is shifting from, attacking with your anger versus sharing your anger, and we'll get down to that when we get down to the outer dialogue aspect. We're going to talk about the motivational tools in working with people who are unmotivated, the changing the inner dialogue, and then changing the outer dialogue. And so you're very right in what you said. But let's start out with the motivational piece. When we're working with somebody in a therapy session, we always want to be measuring things. We measure anger at the start and end of every therapy session, along with depression and anxiety, and then we also want to empathize, and it can be sometimes challenging for the therapist to learn how to empathize with extremely angry people, because they're often somewhat obnoxious and offensive. And so we do a lot of, in our Tuesday and Wednesday groups, training in the 5 secrets of effective communication with patients who provide a lot of challenges, including anger directed at the therapist, or maybe they like the therapist, but they're trying to get the therapist to agree with them that their wife or partner or husband is a malignant loser, and that they're the innocent victim. And you need to learn how to have those conversations in a way that the person will feel understood and accepted. Because if you, the therapist, don't form a warm relationship with the patient, then you probably won't have much, if any, real power or influence when it comes to the treatment. And then I don't think we're going to go into how to do that in this particular segment.
We've talked a lot about the 5 secrets, and even last week we did a 5 secrets example with somebody who was coming at us with anger. With Dana's question.
Yeah. Right. And it's sometimes very, very hard for the therapist, if the anger is directed against the therapist, or if the anger is like you're treating a woman who's very angry with her husband, and maybe even having thoughts of killing him or hurting him. And how do you handle that, not only with the 5 secrets, but from an ethical perspective as well? And in my easy diagnostic system, which I know Jill gives to all patients before getting into the therapy, and that's what I used to do as well. It not only asks questions about suicide and self-harm, but do you have angry thoughts and thoughts of violence directed at other people, or some individual, or some religious group, or cultural group, or something like that? And do you have fantasies of hurting others, and do you have urges to hurt others, and are you making plans to hurt others? And then the whole ethical issues of when we're under legal obligation to tell the patient that we are going to warn the victim and report the threat to the police. And that's really tough, because the patient then gets pissed off at the therapist. And also in my legal form, that patients have to read all the here's what's required of the therapist, what's required of you, the kind of administrative rules. They have to read and agree to that, if they're threatening in the session to hurt others, that's the therapist is legally required to take action to report that behavior and protect the ones who are threatened. But anyway, that's a kind of a sidebar, but it's certainly important. And again, having the forensic training that you do, Rhonda, I'm sure you have a lot of experience with and knowledge of that aspect.
But I wish I knew I had your easy diagnostic tool then, because a lot of people deny those kind of urges and plans, but it's easier to put it down on the kind of report that you do with the easy diagnostic tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if they deny them and then do something, at least you're protected as the shrink, because then they're lying to the mental health professional. So the mental health professional cannot be held liable for that patient for the most part.
So you also brought up an interesting point that Jay didn't bring up, is that so this client is an angry patient and they're coming to you for help to overcome their anger? Is that what's happening?
It can be. It was certainly not as common in my practice, but the negative feelings, when you do a daily mood log, people don't just have one feeling. Right. And I'm sure when you work with your patients using a daily mood log, anger is one of the categories, and there's a lot of synonyms there in that category, because a lot of people don't want to admit that they're angry, but they'll admit they're pissed off or irritated or upset or annoyed, and then they'll generally own up to that at some significant level, like 50%, and then once you get to talking with them, they often kind of let you know that they're really 80 or 100% angry with somebody. But it's easy for therapists and patients to have trouble, dealing with and acknowledging anger. And when I did my research on therapist accuracy and knowing how patients felt, without using like my brief mood survey or the daily mood log where everything is measured and recorded numerically, therapists' ability to recognize anger in their patients is 0%. That's a little known fact, but quite relevant to this topic. If you want to deal with anger in your patients, you have to be using the brief mood survey at the start and end of every session, as well as the daily mood log, so you can find out not only about the patient's anger, but all the other negative feelings that go hand in hand with the anger.
And I'd add the evaluation of therapy session, because if the patient is angry at the therapist, then filling out the evaluation of therapy session at the end of a therapy session is a really great avenue for receiving information from the patient that they're angry at their therapist.
Yeah, and they'll give you a bad grade on empathy, and it makes it an easy avenue to get into it. Boy, we're having a lot to say on this topic.
I know.
We're barely getting started here. Thanks. Was it Jay? Yeah, thanks, Jay, for the good idea. Now, once you've empathized with the patient, what are we going to do next?
Well, would we issue an invitation and ask them if they're ready to start working? We could ask them the miracle cure question to see what their goals are.
Yeah, that's right. And one thing is there's a straightforward and paradoxical invitation. And when you're working with a patient who's very angry and complaining about somebody, I ask a paradoxical invitation, which is quite different from the way most therapists operate. And I would say something like this. Well, just say, pretend you're the patient. Rhonda, you've been talking to me about person X, and I can see that you're really pretty fed up with her and pissed off and ticked off, and you say you've tried everything and nothing helps, and she'll never change, and people can be very difficult. So I hear what you're saying, and I've got a lot of great tools if you wanted to do some work on that relationship and kind of turn it around and develop a closer and more loving relationship with person X. But I didn't hear you asking for that, and I'm assuming that's not something that you want. But don't get me wrong, if you do want it, you're really smart, and I'd love to show you some tools. But I just want to make sure that I'm hearing you right, that's not something you want to do. And that's called the paradoxical invitation. And how did I do on that? And what would be the point of that? And why is that so hard for therapists to learn, Rhonda?
Well, I think the point of that is that you're asking me to argue with you and to tell you in a very strong way that I do want help working on improving this relationship.
Or that you don't.
Or that I don't, right. Or to agree with you and say, you know what, I don't want to work on that relationship. I don't want to get closer to that person. Let's do something else.
Yeah. Now, why would I, the therapist, want to get the patient to say that to me?
Because you don't want to force the patient to work on your agenda. You want the patient to really come to you with their own, hopes and desires to improve the relationship, or else the therapy won't work.
Yeah, that's right. And why is it true that there's a lot of therapists listening right now, and why is it true that almost none of them will be able to do the paradoxical invitation, even though I just modeled it? Why won't they be able to learn this and do this?
Because we have such a strong desire to help. And we want to work with everyone that comes to our office. And so basically we're saying, it doesn't sound like you really want to work with me, and that's okay. And it goes against our own basic instincts and everything we've been taught.
Yeah, that's right. And it has to be done with compassion. And if they don't want to work on that, we can work on something else. But it's called, sitting with open hands. And it also involves humility and giving up the arrogance and narcissism of feeling like you're supposed to save the world. You're supposed to help everyone according to your own personal standards. And I think we all have someone that we don't want to get along with, and we just want to complain and vent about them, and we'll give people that right. And if they change their mind and want to work on it later on, we can always come back to it.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Now, if they do want help, that there's another very helpful thing. And Melanie, my wife, was the one that pointed this out to me, is that a straightforward or paradoxical cost-benefit analysis is nearly always the first thing you do when treating someone who's angry, who says they do want help. And there's at least three kinds of cost-benefit analyses that would be relevant. One is the anger cost-benefit analysis. What are the advantages and disadvantages of feeling this intense anger toward your wife or your colleague at work or your kids or whoever? And you can also instead do a blame cost benefit analysis. So you're probably blaming the other person. So let's list all the advantages of blame. And there's at least 30 distinct advantages of blaming other people or some other person for the problem. And then what are the disadvantages? What's the downside? And then you can also do what I call a relationship cost benefit analysis. What are the advantages and disadvantages of having a relationship with this person, or or to put it differently, what do you want out of it? Do you want to improve your relationship with this person who you say is so sucky? And if so, why? What would be helpful to you in that? How would that be to your advantage? And often there are a lot of advantages. For example, I'm aware of say a friend who's involved in kind of a child custody dispute, and but not trying to work it out on a personal level, and he does carry a lot of anger and resentment towards the mother of the child that they share. And to my way of thinking, very justifiable anger. And I'm sure from her point of view, she's very angry with him and feeling highly justified.
Mm.
But I think he is beginning to treat her in a very kindly way because of a cost-benefit analysis, saying that if he wants to get anywhere with his child and have the chance to spend time with his child, that to form a more positive relationship with the child's mother would be highly to his advantage. And I've seen this a lot of times with people who are harboring hostility toward an ex or a former boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, that the cost benefit analysis can really be an eye opener, because the person may be a real pill. And you have some justifiably intense, angry and negative feelings of resentment and pissed offness, justifiably, but sometimes it does not make good common sense to keep the war going.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And each cost benefit analysis can be done in a straightforward way, like what I said, lists the advantages and disadvantages of your anger or your blame or having a relationship with this person. And then the paradoxical one is you just list all the advantages of the anger, the advantages of the blame, the advantages of having a crappy relationship with a person, how the ways it's helpful to you, and why it's maybe consistent with your personal values to maintain the anger and the blame and the troubled relationship. And then once the person's listed all of that, just say, well, given all of those benefits, it's not clear to me why you'd want to give up your anger. And this can work paradoxically too. And I have a couple stories I could tell. One or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one was a fellow, just to disguise things. Let's say he was hospitalized at my hospital in Philadelphia, and he was brought in involuntarily by the police, and he'd been working at let's say a savings and loan company, and working in the area with disgruntled customers, kind of a customer service type person, something like that. And a fellow came in and was, whining and complaining, and the patient had been a professional athlete at one time, and was large and powerful, and he got so pissed off at this whiny customer that he picked him up and threw him through the air against a wall of the building where he was working. And this seemed not only violent and dangerous, but somewhat psychotic. And they called the police, who came in and they arrested him. But then when he was, I guess, in handcuffs, they realized he was kind of in a manic state, and maybe bipolar 1 type of, which can often be mania or anger or both. And so came instead, brought him involuntarily into the hospital and sent him to my cognitive therapy group, shortly after he did all his paperwork to be admitted to the locked unit. And they sent him to my cognitive therapy group for some anger management.
Mm.
And of course, I never do anger management. I never try to manage people's emotions. But he came in at the beginning of the group, and he'd been in the hospital about 30 minutes, and he was very oppositional at the beginning of the group, and he grumbled that he was here for some of my effing anger management. And And so I told him, I don't do anger management. To me, it's an offensive concept. But tell me what's up. And then he told his story of what had happened and how he got pissed off at this guy. And then I said to him, well, before we do anything here in the group to change your anger, I think we better find out if you want to reduce your anger, because there could be some really good reasons not to. And let's make a list here, and we get the whole group working on it. What are some of the benefits of your anger, and what does it show about you that's positive and awesome? And of course, you've heard this routine many times, Rhonda, but we started coming up with all of these reasons for him to be angry and to act out the way he did. Like, truth was on his side. People do too much complaining, and they're too entitled and making demands on everyone else. And that it showed he had a value system, that he was willing to lay it all on the line for his value system, and that he was willing to show his feelings rather than acting phony and polite to people all the time. And I told him, yeah, right. I think what you did actually is cool. I always wanted to pick someone up and throw them against a wall, but I'm not, big and strong like you were brave. But I think what you did was kind of kick ass, to tell you the truth. And, don't tell anyone I said this, but I'm personally kind of proud of you.
Wow.
And we came up, and it was an hour and a half group. And it took us, the whole group, we came up with his help and the help of the group, something like 17 overwhelming positives in his anger and what he did there, at the Savings and Loan where he worked in Philadelphia. And then it was time for the end of the group. And so I asked him if he'd like the group, and he said he thought it was pretty cool. And one of the conclusions at the end of this list, I said, I can't see any reason for you to give up your anger. And because at the beginning of the group, he was 20 out of 20 on the anger scale. So he was as angry as a human being can be. And then at the end, I said, I don't see any reason for you to give up your anger. And he said, I don't either. And I said, well, we're on the same page, dude. And we did high fives. And then I said, oh, and by the way, how angry are you now on the 0 to 100 level? And he says, oh, 0. All my anger just suddenly disappeared. And that is the paradox, that instead of trying to manage his anger, we did like kind of extreme positive reframing, a paradoxical cost benefit analysis, and brought out all his good reason from where he sat. And then suddenly he wasn't angry anymore. And that's a paradoxical cost-benefit analysis, and it can be incredibly powerful. And you have to do that at the beginning, every time you're working with an angry patient, because you've got to get a buy-in. And you can't get a buy-in by trying to persuade them to change. That is never effective. But if you instead become the voice of their resistance, and show not only an understanding, but an acceptance of their anger. And who among us, give me an effing break, hasn't felt the same way? You know what I mean? I mean, I get angry. Yeah, I get pissed off. Yeah, I think you and I could make a little, our hit list, Rhonda.
Oh, I definitely could.
And we probably have the names of some people. We won't announce them on the program. But if you're listening, that's our thinking, folks. Oh. So, but at any rate, that's always a great starting point. And then if they want to go ahead and learn some tools to deal with their anger, you're on the same team, and it's such a fabulous technique. So that's the motivational piece. Should we go on to another piece, Rhonda? Or?
Yeah, this is awesome.
Okay, thank you. Well, and I hope, Joseph likes it, although Jay, who asked the question, although his issue will, if he writes and shares it with us, it will probably be radically different. But these are good general introductory things.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know if he's angry at a person or what. he's in,
Yeah.
or a situation.
Yeah, right. There's plenty to be angry at in the world these days. That's for sure. Now,
so let's say you've done the blame, anger, and relationship cost benefit analysis, and you have the buy-in with the patient.
Yeah.
And you're on the same team, and your patient wants to learn the tools to change. What's the next step?
Well, then I would tell the patient, now there's a couple parts to change, and you can tell me what you'd like to work on or what you'd like to work on first. But first, your anger comes, and you may not like my saying this, but not from the other person's actions, but from your thoughts about them. That's the cognitive model. And if you like, we can do a daily mood log and take a look at your negative thoughts, and perhaps if you're interested in becoming less angry, challenging some of those distortions. And the negative thoughts will always be a mix of positive and negative distortions. Including telling yourself that the other person is to blame. Blame is huge. It's impossible to feel angry without it. There's a lot of all or nothing thinking, seeing the other person as a total loser, for example. There's a lot of overgeneralization, generalizing from a negative event or a negative characteristic or a negative moment when you were having an argument with the person, and then seeing them in an entirely negative way based on this one negative feature that they have or behavior that they have or habit that they have, or like we all have pretty things about us that are not likable by other people, and so you say, that you generalize from the person's actions to their self, thinking they're, not only did they do something that you feel was bad, but you think they're bad. And you see this in the international conflicts and in the U.S. too. We label people as terrorists, thinking that we've said something meaningful when we haven't. That's also labeling, as if a person's entire essence can be characterized in a single term. Terroristic acts exist, but terrorists do not. From one person's terrorist is the next person's freedom fighter. Mm. And but again, the political ramifications of these terms are so overpowering that a lot of people don't want to hear what I have to say, and that's the addictive part, that they think that other person really is a horrible person. In fact, Jeremy Carmel told me a pretty neat Buddhist story on this very thing. It's a shorty. You want me?
Well, yeah, yep.
It was in ancient India that there was a kind of a sadistic murderer rapist in the town, and everyone was terrified. I mean, it's just like the modern times. And this fellow broke into his parents' house and raped and murdered his mother right in front of him, and also murdered his father, and then raped and murdered his mother.
Oh my God!
In a most sadistic manner. Mm. And he was just a little kid, and he said his goal in life would be to find this. Did I tell this story? Or?
Maybe, but not for a long time.
Okay. We'll let the elderly guy off the hook. But that's sorry.
But you're putting it in the context of this discussion, so it's valuable.
And said, made it his goal to hunt this man down and kill him and get his revenge. And as he grew older, he did that, and he finished his schooling, and he spent his entire life looking for this fellow. And after a number of years. He's probably 26, 27 years old. Somebody said, I know where that man is, and I'll tell you how to find him if you want. And so he told him that he was, at a certain location at a mountain, and that you could find him there because he's been digging a tunnel. And so he was all excited and got some, knife, and went out there to murder this fellow, hunted him down, went to this mountain. Sure enough, the fellow was there. And, he said, I was that little boy, and I've spent my entire life looking for you, and I finally found you, and I'm going to murder you. And the fellow said, well, you can do that if you like, and I won't even fight you on it, because I certainly deserve to be murdered. But I'm wondering if I could get your help for a little while before you kill me. You see, I've been digging this tunnel because there's a village on the other side of this mountain, and the children have no way to get to school. And I've been working for months on this tunnel. And if I can get it all the way to the other side of the mountain, then and it's not that much further to go, then they'll have their tunnel. Then they can come and get schooling. And then if you would help me, and you don't have to, but if you'd help me, then we can work together. And then at the end, you can go ahead and kill me, which I deserve. And so he decided to help this murderous fellow who had raped and killed his mother and killed his father. And they worked for several months, long hours every day, digging in the tunnel, taking the dirt out. And finally, they came to the other side, saw the light and saw the village, and what a wonderful thing this was going to be for the village. And then he said, okay, you can go ahead and kill me now. And I want to thank you for all the help you gave me completing the tunnel. And then the younger men said to him, but why would I want to kill my best friend?
Mm.
And it was just that moment of seeing how we so dehumanize people with our thoughts, and people do horrible things and bad things. And I think all human beings do bad things in varying magnitudes. And we all have things we're ashamed of, and a beautiful side of things that we can be proud of as well. But that's the whole idea behind labeling and overgeneralization are key distortions in anger, devaluing another person. And then there's the shoulds, the other directed shoulds. He shouldn't be like that. She shouldn't have said that. And then there's mind reading, which is huge too. You imagine the other person's motives. And when you're in conflict with someone, like a family member or something, you nearly always attribute malignant motives to them. And sometimes there's a lot of truth in those malignant motives, and sometimes there's some truth in them, and sometimes there's no truth in them, that you're actually not understanding why the other person is behaving in the way they're behaving. And another common distortion is emotional reasoning. I feel pissed off at you, therefore you're a scum. I feel like I want to kill you and get back at you. Therefore, you must be very bad. And those are the kinds of the kinds of thoughts that trigger anger and violence.
the kinds of cognitive distortions, the thoughts.
Yeah. And some of them are positive distortions where you say, I'm morally superior to you. That's a positive distortion. And then you're a bad person. That's a negative distortion.
That story you tell about this guy who befriended the rapist and murderer, it's so hard to integrate that this young boy sees this horrific murder and rape of his parents and carries the anger with him for his whole life. He's driven for retribution, and I can imagine him organizing his entire life for retribution and to kill this guy. And yet he had to completely change his perspective in order to work with him and then reassess that he's now his best friend. And, that dissonance, that he's living with, I wonder what that was like for him to kind of switch from, I hate this person, I've hated him all my life, and to switching from that to, wow, I admire this guy. I've been working with him. He's my best friend now.
Yeah. Well, I think the Buddhists might say that is a type of enlightenment. But it's very difficult because it's such an addictive thing. Anger. I saw a program on TV about a fellow who shot two teenage boys with his, those automated bow and arrow.
Right.
It was a road rage thing, and they pulled over by the side of the road, and he was pissed off at these boys for, goading him, in traffic, and so he shot them both. He killed one instantly, and the other was cut his spinal cord in half, and he was paralyzed for life.
Wow.
And he was, convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. And then one of the TV shows interviewed him in prison and said, "Do you ever have any regret about what you did?" And he said, "Regret? You've got to be crazy. What I did to those boys, that was the greatest thing in my life, the greatest achievement I've ever had. And I think about it every day, and it makes me tremendously happy."
Wow.
And that's that dark side to human nature, and how these distortions, positive and negative distortions, put us into a very vengeful, bloodthirsty mindset. And again, we see it all over the world right now, and people don't want to come down off it. They don't want to let go. They just say, "Well, we'll do. Just let us murder a few more of you, and then we'll have peace."
Yeah.
And it's really tough.
Okay, so the last part of what you wanted to talk about was the outer dialogue, where we're attacking, with your anger versus sharing your anger.
Yeah, and maybe that would be enough for us to talk about on this podcast, and we could go more into the details on another occasion of the relationship journal or something of that.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
But it was on one of the Sunday hikes that Tony Bates, who was working at my clinic in Philadelphia, he's from Ireland now. He earned his doctoral degree, and now he's back in Ireland. But we used to do jog around Haverford College every single Sunday, or weekends. I think it was Sunday mornings, might have been Saturdays, I don't remember. But we would talk about difficult cases and different ideas. And once he mentioned the difference between attacking with your anger and sharing your anger. And I'd never thought of it myself. And it was a simple idea, but it's pretty illuminating. And the idea is not that it's bad to be angry, but it's how you share your anger and how you express it. And if your goal is to hurt and demean the other person, then you're attacking with your anger. You want to get back at them. You want them to feel pain. You want to hurt them. you want to put them down. And that's what the theologian Martin Buber, early 20th century, and I think he was a Jewish theologian.
He was.
You might know the answer to that, Rhonda, or might not know.
No, I believe he was Jewish. Yep.
Yeah. And he called that an I-it relationship, where you see the other person as an object to be manipulated. And that's what the Buddhists call the cause of all evil, is the idea that we're separate from the universe. And so you feel like you're separate and different from that it person. And so you're going to give them some pain, and you're going to end up ahead because of that. And then the other thing is to share your anger. And that's where you let the other person know directly and openly that you are angry with them, and because of something they're doing, not because of something they are. And that your goal of sharing the anger is to develop a deeper and more meaningful and more, maybe even more loving relationship with that person. And you can virtually always share your anger in a constructive way if you're willing to do so. Again, it's a decisional thing, because you may not want to, and most people don't want to. They want to get vengeance. And I mentioned, and you disagreed, which is totally fine, because it's just kind of a philosophical issue. But I think that this desire for vengeance is kind of hardwired into human nature. I think we're an aggressive animal, one of the very aggressive animals, and we also have capacity for great loving acts and feelings and tender feelings as well. But it's that there's those two ways of sharing the anger. And then maybe if we can come back, because we have a lot of good stuff to talk about in the outer dialogue, and we could have a whole hour on the relationship journal, the technique called forced empathy.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
The 12 reasons not to empathize, not to share your feelings, not to convey respect. There's a lot of cool stuff. If some of our listeners would like more on this topic, or if you, Jay, would like more on this topic.
Yeah, let us know so we can keep going. Whew. Oh my gosh, I'm feeling so kind of tingly. That was really interesting and enlightening.
Thank you, Rhonda. I always love doing podcasts with you, and I know a lot of our listeners love you also, because you're so smart, but also so kind of bubbly and loving, and
thank you.
and joyous. It's just
well, it's easy
really
to be that way,
thing.
and thank you. And it's easy to be that way in response to you. This was a masterclass, and it was so interesting.
Well, I hope people will ask for more, because as Jay says, we're kind of overdue on the topic of anger, and there's the beliefs that lead to it, the entitlement and truth, the self-defeating beliefs, as well as the cognitive distortions, and the whole thing about the death of the self when you use the relationship journal, seeing that you're actually provoking the very problem you've been complaining about.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
And if we do, I'll tell the story about that man who was so pissed off at his wife and blaming her for their rotten marriage. And did he have a surprise coming?
Oh, that's a good teaser. Don't say anything else.
Okay. Yeah. All
okay.
Right.
Well, thank you, David.
You.
This was amazing. And really want to thank Jay for bringing this question to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jay. And hope you're not angry with us.
Or if you are, I hope you tell us in a kind way.
Yeah, share it.
Share it. Don't
Don't
attack us.
Revenge on us.
Yeah.
Okay, goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Have a great week.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.